Hello. Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Donna, I think you and I talked about kind of reaching out to different platforms and getting different perspectives on our initiative to have a conversation about race from a mother's perspective. And I think we did an excellent job of getting someone who is very, very passionate about the same things we're passionate about. And that's pretty much to give mothers resources and answers to how to have conversations with their children about the racism in America and dealing with police, and someone who is very hands-on in that effort as well. We'd like to introduce our guest tonight, Andrew Stroth, who is a civil rights attorney, a former sports and entertainment agent, and we'll talk about that too in your journey to becoming a civil rights attorney. But we just thought it was good to hear from someone who deals with the pain and the loss of mothers that we talk about, and trying to help them, cope with losing their child at the hands of police brutality and frankly, what we consider murder. Right, Donna? Or you have a better word for it.
Oh, I call it lynching.
Yeah, a different word, I should say. And, I just think it's an important conversation to add to all the conversations that we've had with mothers. We've talked with mothers from all different careers, the mayor of Gloucester, Judge Christina Perez, Wanda Durant, even Lori Trahan, who's a representative in Congress. But this one's a little different. This one, I think, will touch home a little bit more to change the hearts and minds of women who really don't think this exists, and who are really ignorant to what really happens to our Black and brown children. And, we were just hoping to get some insight from him as to, what he has to deal with on a daily basis. And I thought it was very important for us to have him because I want to change the hearts and minds of the middle class white woman who is ignorant to racism and doesn't think that these things happen to our children. I want to change her heart and her mind. Because to me, Donna, if she's raising children that fortunately or unfortunately will become decision makers in America, who's hiring and firing CEOs, police officers, if she's raising those children, I want her to have compassion and empathy for what we're about to share over the next couple of minutes. I want to change her heart and her mind so she's developing children or people who are empathetic and diverse and understand that we are all one and we all should be treated equally. So that was my reasoning for having him on. And I know you've spoken to Andrew a little bit prior. I want to know, what was your reasoning for thinking that having him on would be important?
Well, for me, welcome Andrew to our little discussion group here. For me, I want to know what it's like you are on the front line. You have an important function for these families, these grief-stricken people. And, I'm so interested in knowing how you keep your composure and go to sleep each night, get up and start again to do this very difficult work. It's draining. Dealing with people who are so grief-stricken, it's draining. It's important, but it's draining. And I want to know what's your source of, I want to know how you keep strong. How do you support these women, these families, through the most difficult time of their lives, bar none? There's nothing worse for a woman to go through than lose their child, and to have your child murdered. I don't think you could get any worse.
Well, I would say for me, I rely on my faith in God, and I have 3 young children myself, and I can't imagine losing a child, let alone losing a child to unjustified police violence, or, as you said, modern day lynching. I have been to more funerals for young people the past 6 years than I've been to funerals in the past, 50 plus years of my life.
Wow.
But I'm grateful and I'm honored because mothers in our communities represent the influencers. Mothers in our communities are the first responders. Back in the day when I was in sports, I used to represent the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, Donovan McNabb. His mom, Mama McNabb, Wilma McNabb, was also my client, and she became the Campbell's Soup lady and became very famous in sports. But through that experience with Mama McNabb, my own experience with my mom, and all the mothers across the country that we represent, I believe that the mothers can be the change. I believe that if the mothers come together, they can change this world. No, I deal with tremendous. Every time I walk into a living room, it's the worst situation that has happened to this family. And my perspective is I'm there as a resource. I'm there to provide value at a moment that is very traumatic. And I want to do everything I can to fight for justice for these families. And while it is very intense, I feel like God has put me in this position to be a resource to these families. But it's heavy. You can't, it's not like what I used to do when I used to represent athletes. It's not like doing a Nike contract. When you leave a family's home, I represented a family. I represent a family. 16-year-old son, Pierre Laurie, was shot and killed by the police. He was climbing over a fence on the west side of Chicago. I was meeting with the family. The family had interviewed several lawyers. And when I was leaving the family's house, I said, listen, if I can help you, I want to help. If you're going to select another lawyer, that's fine. Let me know, and I'll help you research that lawyer to make sure you make the right decision, because it's about your family. It's not about me. And I left the home, and while I was driving home, about 20 minutes later, the aunt called me while they were grieving around the table, and they said, we just finished our family meeting, and we're going with you because we trust you, we have faith in God, and we have faith in you. And I literally hung up the phone, and I was just struck with so much humility that family had chosen our law firm to help them at one of the worst moments of their life. I'll tell you one other quick story. I represent the family of Jose Nieves. Their son was shot and killed by the police 3.5 years ago. Well, there's a criminal trial against the officer, and the officer was convicted. Only the third time in the past 50 years that a Chicago police officer has been convicted of second-degree murder. After the judge made his ruling, there's media everywhere. We walked up to the podium. I spoke. The family spoke. We walked away. The mother came up to me and hugged me so tightly and said, Andrew, I love you and what you've done for my family. We can never tell you how grateful we are. I had to leave the courthouse because I was so struck with emotion, because this family lost their son. She lost her son. And she was thanking me because I worked with the state's attorney to get the evidence and the witnesses and the information to help them pursue that charge, which resulted in a successful conviction, which is almost unprecedented. So I got to tell you, I'm humbled by these mothers. These mothers give me strength. And I'm just grateful that they let us be a service, but I cannot bring their son back. So I want
you can't.
I want the mothers to come together. Your organization, Mothers Against Racism, and the other mothers that we work with, you all control the keys to change the world.
Right. You mentioned the grief and the loss and how painful it is for mothers to experience this. And it's a void. It's a void that can never be filled. It's something that's inexplicable, I believe, and unimaginable for any mother to think about life without their children. And I want to read some statistics to you, and then I want to share a video that I think your organization, Hope, Truth, and Justice Initiative put together. So I'd like to read these stats just to bring it home a little bit to most of our viewers. An unarmed Black man is 5 times more likely to be killed than an unarmed white man. Black males are 2.5 times more likely to be killed. Black females are 1.4 times more likely to be killed. Black children are 6 times more likely to be shot to death by police than any other of their white peers. Those are tremendous stats. That's staggering. And I want to play this video so we can see exactly how inexplicable and unimaginable it could be for the mothers.
I um
Right.
Yeah, so 1,000 civilians are killed by the police every year. The Washington Post and the Guardian have the statistics. So think about that. 1,000 people are killed by the police every single year in America. And as you mentioned, a disproportionate number of those victims are Black and brown young people. I mean, I have a young 12-year-old Black son, and you know, when your kids watch the fire trucks drive by your house, they're waving, they're happy. Police car drives by your house, it's a very different response.
That's right.
There's a lack of trust in our communities between the police and especially in communities of color. And that
Yeah.
video shows those mothers have experienced the pain we can't even imagine. And I tell the families, I can't imagine their pain, but I'm going to do everything in my power with my team to try to help them get through what is the worst moment in their lives.
And we talk about it being a Black issue, but it's not. I mean, tell us a little bit about the diversity of the mothers you represent.
Yeah, we've got Black mothers, white mothers. I mean, we have mothers all over the country. We represent the family of Andy Finch, Wichita, Kansas. There was a swatting call. 2 young men from Los Angeles called a prank call to the Wichita Police Department. The Wichita Police Department showed up. My client's son was in his house with his family, watching TV, hanging out. He hears noise outside. He goes to the door, opens the door, and from a half a football field away, a sharpshooter from the Wichita Police Department shoots and kills him within seconds of him opening the door. White man, unarmed, in the sanctity of his own home, shot and killed. So our mothers are white, they're Black, they're Hispanic, they're young, they're old. And we launched the Truth, Hope, and Justice Initiative to tell the human truths and the stories of these families. People watch the news and they don't know that Black kid was somebody's son.
Right.
That Black man was somebody's father. That kid had dreams. He had hopes. And so we believe if we humanize these families and share the stories, and with groups like yours helping share the word and mobilize and amplify other mothers, we can effectuate some change.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you don't take every case. Like, you know, you really have to investigate the incident before you represent these mothers, because I don't want people out there to think, you know, there are people who are alleged to have committed some sort of altercation where police have to use force, and then there are others that are unjustified, completely unjustified. So tell people who are out there thinking every murder by a police officer is justified, what you do to make sure that you separate the two.
Well, first of all, when I spent 20 years representing professional athletes at the highest level, and then 6 years ago I created this firm because I saw a lot of situations where I believed that was an unjustified shooting. I thought to myself, how come every time the police PR person comes on the news, the Black kid had a gun, they're in fear of their life, and they had to shoot, and the young man ends up dead? I just didn't think that was truth. So what I do when I evaluate cases is, the other thing I will say is, I am pro-police. I am pro-police. I'm anti-police that violate the Constitution. And it's not just white officers that violate the Constitution, it's Black officers too. We take less than 20% of the cases that come to our firm, because if there's not evidence supporting the version of events of the excessive force or use of lethal force by the officers, we won't take the case, because in many situations, those officers want to go home at night too, to their families, and they deserve to. But if in many cases the officers have lied on their police reports, the video, they said they were in fear of their life, but the young man was shot in his back, or the evidence provided by the police doesn't match the objective evidence. So if I'm looking at an autopsy or a video or an eyewitness statement, I look for situations that objectively, if I was in front of a jury, they would look at the same evidence and say, what that officer did was not right. It was unreasonable and it was unconstitutional.
Correct.
So, Andrew, when you go to court, how often do you actually get into the courtroom with any of these cases, and how difficult is it to win them?
Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. Most cases don't go to trial. In the federal courts, it's around 80 to 90% of cases that get resolved prior to a trial. So it's very unlikely that you do a trial. The other thing is the average time to go from getting a civil case to an actual trial could easily be 3, 4, or 5 years. The other thing your audience should know is there's two different actions. When an officer shoots someone, and let's say it's unjustified, there is a separate criminal potential investigation where the officer could be charged with a criminal offense. That's handled by the district attorney or state's attorney. And as you all know, the standard of evidence for that type of case is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt that that officer used force. On the civil context, in the civil case that I handle, the evidence is called a preponderance. So it's 51% more likely than not that the officer violated the Constitution. So we handle the civil cases. Number one, they're very difficult to win these cases. Most trials, generally speaking, especially pre-George Floyd, were law enforcement favorable. And with qualified immunity and a lot of the laws on the books today, it's very difficult to win a case against the police unless you have strong objective evidence, especially video evidence. We wouldn't be here today but for George Floyd, and we wouldn't be here today but for everyone in America and in the world walking around with their cell phone. Everyone is a citizen journalist. And the reason there was a reckoning, from my perspective, on May 25th last year was because the world saw video that was very disturbing on so many levels. And so it's tough to win these cases. And they're risky because all the work we do is all based on contingency. And they're very expensive. Like what we do is we have drones and we have investigators, and we spend a lot of time, energy, and money and resources to get the evidence that we need. You don't win the case at trial, Donna. You win the case on the ground, getting the evidence long before you're in a court of law.
What my feeling is that this is going to be, for some families, in fact, most families, this is the only justice they're going to receive, because they're not going to receive the justice in the criminal system. They're going to greater chance for them to get some kind of justice through the civil method.
Right, Donna. But if I ask you and Dania, I'll give you $1 billion.
$2 billion.
So the law system is flawed too, because there's no amount of money that's worth the life of your child. And you look at the video of the mothers, they've all lost part of their heart and soul. That will never come back. And so how do we change the system? The mothers want to change the system so it doesn't happen to their other friends and family.
Right.
Speaking of the system, tell me your thoughts on the Justice in Policing Act, because I know you're a big supporter of that. So tell us about that, because it's changing.
So Kamala Harris, now our vice president, and Senator Cory Booker, and Karen Bass from California, and the Congressional Black Caucus put together a powerful piece of legislation called the Justice in Policing Act. When we did our Rise Up and Stand, a tribute to our mothers, on October 23rd on Facebook, and again, it's going to air this Sunday on BET, our call to action, listen, I support marching, I support protesting, I support different groups coming together. But if you want to save lives, we have to change legislation. And the Justice and Policing Act, it provides high training of de-escalation for officers. It gives a ban on chokeholds. It bans no-knock warrants. Breonna Taylor would be alive today. It encourages the use of body cameras. Body cameras protect the officers and civilians.
Correct.
Because if you're doing the right thing, then everyone wants to be on camera. It establishes a national police misconduct registry. It requires law enforcement to report use of force data. It reforms qualified immunity, which is a super high level protection for officers. So we want to advance legislation together. It's good for the police and it's good for our communities, especially our communities of color.
Andrew, what do you think is the greatest reason police brutality exists?
Well, that's a very tough question. I mean, I think unfortunately in our society, when you think about the name of your organization, Mothers Against Racism, I think unfortunately, why do these events happen in communities of color more often than not? I think in many cases you have officers, a person's skin can be weaponized in the eyes of the officer. So I think race really, really matters. I have several cases that I really think that in a white suburb, there would be a very different outcome. So I think we have to recruit the right officers. We have to train the right officers. If there's no trust between the police and our communities, how can we move forward when there's no trust? And so, I'm not sure I can articulate the answer. I just think racism is deep, and I think we have a culture that is consumed with guns and weapons and drugs. And I also think, to the officers' defense, they're put in tough situations.
Social workers, they become so many different things.
Right.
Well, tell me this: why do officers respond if it's a mental health call? And some officers have crisis intervention training, some don't. If an officer is called to a scene where there is a need of mental health counseling, yet their training focuses on shooting and hurting people, I just don't think that's a good combination. We have to, and also I do not believe in the defund the police.
That's
my
next question.
I believe in investing, reallocating into different services provided. Why aren't social workers sent out? Why aren't the de-escalation training the whole force? I mean, I think we put officers in positions that are very tough, and I think there's a lot of bad outcomes based on a lack of training, a lack of sensitivity, a lack of respect. When you have officers from outside of the community coming into a community that they're already uncomfortable, that's a recipe for bad outcomes.
Right.
And what are your feelings about police unions? Because I have some pretty strong ones.
Well, I'll tell you, we are based in Chicago, but have cases across the country. And I think the Fraternal Order of Police have incredible power. They have incredible influence politically. They have set up. Here's the problem. When something happens, the police control all the information. They control the video. They control the evidence. They control the narrative, and they have a union, especially in big cities, that protects those officers. And I just want to focus on truth. Certain jurisdictions, why does an officer get to wait 24 to 48 hours before they give a statement? I think those statements should be taken contemporaneously with the incident. Why do in Chicago they have the code of silence? The code of silence is because the officers get together and get their stories lined up.
Correct.
So I think the union contracts are one of the most important issues if we're going to advance systemic change.
Because when I think of police unions, I think they protect the bullies that the bad cops. They don't, and they're also hurting the good officers. I think by protecting those bad ones, they
I
just
think
have the full force of black eye.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and the problem is, if you're a good officer, but you're riding with a bad officer, and the bad officer does something bad, but then you tell the truth on that bad officer, then you're going to get maligned by the union. So it's very complex. And
See, because for me, when I think about this, I think step one, get rid of the police unions. Let's start over. That's just a thought.
Well, there needs to be best practices. I mean, it's pretty ironic when command staff and even chiefs of certain major police departments have reached out to me. Our law firm sues police departments every month. Yet the police have reached out to us because they want to get rid of bad officers too. But unfortunately, there's a culture that protects the police. And the only thing I will say is, because there's video evidence these days, even if the police are trying to protect the police, evidence, and because of the power of social media is also disrupting all the historical norms.
Right. And I think another thing along with that is just the unrest within the community, the unrest within America, that we're not going to sit back and have this be a pandemic. Along with COVID, we're dealing with another pandemic, and that's a loss of lives due to unfortunate situations like you represent. But our call to action, I think, for Donna and I came when George Floyd was murdered. And, that weekend we got together and said, we have to no longer be silent, because it could have been our children. It could have been my sons, any one of my sons, to be in that situation. So that was our call to action. And I want to hear a little bit about your call to action, because obviously going from being a sports and entertainment agent to now a civil rights attorney and having a nonprofit organization, Truth, Hope, and Justice. Tell us about your revelation, your moment where you said enough's enough and I have to make a difference.
Yeah, I went through a pretty big change. I mean, I spent all those years 20 years representing NFL players, NBA players. I was blessed and fortunate to have some very high profile players. But I remember coming home and my wife said, "Why are you unhappy?" I said, making millionaire athletes millions of dollars is fun, it's cool, it's sexy, but it's not changing the world, and it's not why God put me on this earth. So I literally on Monday was a sports attorney, and on Wednesday I was a civil rights attorney. I just started a firm called Action Injury Law Group, and I said I'm going to represent Black and brown people whose family members have been shot, killed, or injured by police. And I'm going to do it because I'm going to be a bridge between our communities of color and the best team of trial lawyers in America.
Wonderful.
So fast forward 6 years to today, we're one of the leading civil rights firms in America. We only handle police cases. And I decided, doing the litigation is not enough. And even though I've got a tremendous team of lawyers, including several Supreme Court clerks that work co-counsel with us, I started Truth, Hope, and Justice, which is to mobilize, amplify, lift up mothers, tell their stories. And our call to action is simple. It's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It needs to be passed so that we can advance legislation and save lives. And I think if we can march and protest and leverage social media and advance this legislation, and I will tell you, as I said at the top of the program, to me, the mothers are the key to this. If we're going to make change, it's going to be groups like yours and other mothers that come together to demand change and demand justice. Because if it was, I can't. Every time I leave a house, it makes me hug my kids tighter. Because we got to turn that. All these mothers want to turn their pain into purpose.
Right. And it's a difficult avenue, because I lost a sibling, and I remember when the officers came to my house, and my mother, I never heard my mother scream the way she screamed that night. And I had a wonderful mother, and the screaming still echoes in my head. And there's no relief ever. And it changed my mother forever. And it wasn't the same kind of situation. My brother was killed in a war, but losing a child, a mother never recovers. And finding a purpose, and what my mother's purpose after that was, she became very involved in veterans groups, and that helped her. Mm-hmm. Whereas, what do these mothers do?
Well, these mothers, I got to tell you, we've gotten them together on different occasions, and these are strong women and strong women of faith. And while their lives have been changed forever, I'm so impressed by how resilient these women are and how committed to change they are. And that's why we decided if they come together, they can demand this change. And here's the thing, it could be any of our children. That's and so, just because, the NBA mothers are working with us, the NFL mothers want to work with us, one turn left, one turn right, those kids may not be in the league. They could be in a bad situation because they're a Black kid in America. So I don't know. My call to action is your call to action. Is how can we work together to advance change with the mothers, demanding from our political leaders, demanding from our communities, demanding from the police. Just demand. We have to change. We cannot not change.
And I want you to share the story about the concert that you took the mothers to, because I think it's a great example of how we try to find moments where they could step outside of their reality, step outside of their pain and loss, and feel good again. And to tell us about that.
Yeah, it was so I decided a while ago when we launched Truth, Hope, and Justice that we wanted to get the mothers together. We wanted to shoot their photographs. We wanted to do their videos. And I said, how can I get all these mothers together and have them show up? So it was December 2016. It was like one of the coldest days of the year. But I had planned to take all these mothers to the Mary J. Blige Maxwell concert at the United Center in Chicago in December. But what I said is, in order to come, you got to pick up your ticket at photography studio on the west side of Chicago. So I had all the mothers came to the studio. We had dinner, we had food, we had some drinks, and we filmed all these mothers. Downstairs, we did all the photographs. Upstairs, we did the video, and it was like a party, right? It was pre-COVID. It was, the world was still, and all these mothers got together, and it was a celebration of life. And so we did the photos, and then we took buses over to the United Center, and these women for 3 or 4 hours were in the suites, loving Maxwell, loving Mary J. Blige. And some of these women had never in recent times been happy. And it was like, they're all part of a sorority that they never wanted to join, but there they were together celebrating in their pain. And a lot of those mothers I'm still in contact with today. It's tragic because the sorority grows every single week. But I'm trying to help these mothers work with other mothers. And in Portland on April 10th and 11th, we're filming another 75 mothers. And so, when these mothers are together, they're praying together, they're singing together, but we have to tell their stories, because while the world watched George Floyd, what about all these other mothers?
That's right.
There's been a pandemic in the Black community for years. It's just now all of a sudden people see George Floyd, and all of a sudden there's this sudden awakening of what's happening. But what I would say is we have an opportunity at this moment to advance change.
Right. So for me, one of our guests, I don't know who said it, but I said, "Oh, I love this," and they said, "Not on our watch." And this is, as mothers, as me as a mother, I never ever want to see another mother lose a child senselessly again. And it's up to us, standing together to create this change.
And I think what you do, Andrew, is you give them a voice. You give them a voice to say, my child was not just a statistic. My child was a person. You talk about you talk about the personalities of their children. What made them so great? What made them the best children? I think we have to bring out more of these stories and let people know we're not just a statistic. These are actual people who are loved. Who are loved. And I think your organization does that. It brings a voice. And one thing at the end of the video said, they can't be silent, because their silence aren't sharing the stories, which will bring about empathy, which I think will bring about change. Like I said, I want to change the mind of that white middle-class woman who's ignorant to racism and ignorant to police brutality and what it causes when, it takes an innocent life, an innocent Black or brown
Yes.
life. It goes, it resonates beyond just the news story.
Well,
It resonates within the community. It resonates, so far and wide. And I think what your organization does is tremendous.
well, we're trying to change lives. I mean, we had a trial in Eugene, Oregon, a while back, and the daughter of the man, it was a father who was killed by the police in Eugene, Oregon. We had a 2-week trial, and I was doing the direct examination on the daughter, and I was asking her questions about her father. And she would say, when she would go to the coast of Oregon, the sun would shine. Her dad made the sun shine. She lost the sunshine when her dad was unjustifiably shot and killed by the Eugene Police Department. And so when you hear that, the whole courtroom was silent, because you hear this young lady whose life has been changed forever because police officers were overzealous and they shot and killed him in the sanctity of his own home. And so we need to learn from these mothers. We need to learn from these stories. And the Justice and Policing Act, to me, is the first step. And as mothers, I just think, again, if we mobilize mothers, we're going to change the world. And I hope that I work with you all.
We already know that.
You believe so, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you guys, if you guys can help ignite other mothers, you guys hold the keys to everything. I just want to rebuild a platform.
One guest at a time. I want to play a little bit of a production that your organization put together to give more of a voice to the mothers and an avenue for change. And I really want our audience to see it. We have about 10 people watching right now. More will tune in, I think, when it's re-recorded on our platforms. But what I want you to do when we come back is talk a little bit about that and share your social media information, share the information on your nonprofit. How can be more supportive? But I think this production is really powerful, and I want to play it now.
Neck. Derek didn't die instantly, and he didn't die.
I left for work that day with the expectations of giving my daughter a party, and instead I had to come home and start planning her funeral.
I just began to scream, Cordell, if you can hear me, get up. He never got up.
To this day, I can still hear her telling me that my son is dead.
They literally pulled Gary and dragged him to the side of the road as if my baby was roadkill. He got shot 3 times in the chest. I wanted to see him just to hug and kiss him, tell him that I love him.
He shot my son as he sat in the driver's seat 14 times. He never made it out the car.
I was told that Derek died instantly of a broken neck. Derek didn't die instantly, and he didn't die of a broken neck. He died from lack of attention from a punctured lung.
The officer shot him in the back, and that bullet hit the vein in his neck and exited through his eye socket, causing him his life.
He was trying to climb a fence, to get away, and the police shot him in the back.
Kimani was my only child, and I watched him die in my arms. It took everything in me to just breathe. I didn't understand. Every day I am reminded when I look in the mirror that my son is not here. It's just a lot of days without him. I feel lost.
That was my everything. And to lose him, it crushed me.
We were just a close-knit family. And, by Angelo's gone, it's like, ain't nothing right.
That was my first child, my firstborn child,
You think of your children burying you. You don't think of you burying your children.
She was a strong advocate for the underdog.
He didn't want to party and hang out. He wanted to be married.
He was very quiet. He had this very kind of reserved old man spirit about him.
He worked a part-time job at a local nursing home.
You could be nobody, and Cordell would show you that he cared.
She was such a beautiful, intelligent young lady.
He glowed.
Was that I loved her. And I got to hear her say she loved me too.
The only thing you have left is to fight.
So when you see the rage and you see the fury, and I'm out there on the front line at every single march, that was instilled in me from justice.
My fight continues not only for Gary, because it's bigger than Gary. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us.
Speak up for your child. Step out for your child. You let everyone know, nationally, internationally, you're not taking it sitting down.
I'm not one to believe that all policemen are bad policemen. I just don't believe in that.
It's not the officers, it's the system.
How could we work with law enforcement? How could we ask you to stop killing our kids?
It just doesn't always have to end up where some mother is, grieving for her child.
I could never tell a mother that it's gonna get better, because it's not gonna get better. It get worse.
This is a pain that I would never wish on my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish on anybody to have their child taken from them.
I will never be normal again. Never.
It's forever. It is forever.
How could we not stand up and fight for our children?
You watch as people normalize it and they say it's okay, it's not okay. And so I want every parent to know, no, this is no time to shut up. You speak out for your baby.
I will fight for my child with my last breath.
There's no peace or rest for anybody anymore.
Wow.
Every time I watch that, you feel the emotion of those mothers. I mean, so our website is truthhopejustice.org, truthhopejustice.org, and our Instagram, we have a digital memorial of mothers across the country telling their stories, and that's at truthhopejustice. And our law firm, which is separate, is Action Injury Law Group. So we want to be a resource to the community, and we're a public interest law firm, and we're a fiscal sponsor nonprofit, Truth, Hope, and Justice, and we want to work with Mothers Against Racism and others to collaborate and change the world.
Wonderful. Tell us, it's going to be on BET at Lent, right?
So our film, Rise Up and Stand, a tribute to our mothers, will be airing this Sunday, February 21st. I think it's 8 o'clock Central Standard Time on BET Her. So it'll be on BET Her on Sunday night, and then it'll be on BET Plus, which is their digital platform. And it's entitled, again, Rise Up and Stand, a tribute to our mothers.
Wonderful. Well, Andrew, we really want to thank you for being here with us tonight and sharing your purpose.
Well, I appreciate you all so much, and I hope to stay in touch with you all.
Yeah, this is definitely something we can no longer stay silent about. And we, like you said, have said several times, we have to unite. Mothers, you have to unite. And I think you're doing an excellent job of bringing us all together and, making sure no other child and no other mother has to go through this. So I definitely want to thank you for being here with us tonight.
No, you're welcome. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.